When generative AI burst onto the scene a couple of years back, it seemed to many like something out of science fiction. But it's certainly not fiction now. It's real, it's here among us, and it's being used widely in organizations. So how is L&D using this powerful new technology? Do we really understand all that it can do yet to transform learning? The Learning Leaders Podcast, brought to you by NIIT in association with The Learning Hack, features conversations with chief learning officers and heads of learning from global companies. We'll be hearing about the learning journeys of these leaders, the changes they are bringing in their organizations, and how they're preparing their workforces for the future of learning. The following is a conversation with Brandon Dickens. Brandon is VP User Experience at NIIT based in Chicago and a bit of a rock star. His background in rhetoric and pedagogy informs the way he's helping clients to use AI to transform L&D. Every day, he says, I get to dream up stuff that seemed impossible just a couple of years ago and make it real. We talked about the maturity model for AI learning he introduced earlier in the year, where clients are right now in their adoption of AI, and what we can expect to see in the near future. You heard it here first. So Brandon, it's great to have you on the podcast. Welcome to the Learning Leaders.
Thank you, John. Excited to be here.
In a public webinar given back in July 2024, you shared some experiments you'd carried out to explore the capabilities of large language models for learning at various levels of maturity. You shared a maturity model, basically. There have been several jaw-dropping moments in the last couple of years with AI, and this for me was one of them, quite truly. Can you talk a bit about that work? It's very detailed, so probably best you summarize, and maybe give us an update. For instance, are you using these techniques in client work yet? Are they being used in anger?
Yeah, I mean, there's been just so much movement in the generative AI space and learning over the last 12 months or so. The things that are really exciting me are really just kind of the key beats that we've noticed as we've been experimenting with the models. I mean, the first is that, the level and depth of knowledge inside the models, I think it exceeds what anybody imagines is there. And that means that we can do all the kinds of training that we do today really, really, really quickly. And we're seeing lots of uptake of that. There's a whole category of our clients who are getting courses done a lot faster than they ever could before. The more exciting part is the kind of the new modalities that the large language models are unlocking for us. So, we're doing a lot of experiments, a lot of pilots, and some live launches now, finally, of real-time AI simulations where large language models are being used to spin up a totally custom role play or simulation for a learner in real time, give them custom scaffolding, totally personalized feedback and so forth. It's kind of the holy grail moment, and we're finally seeing it become real.
So that's the more sophisticated stuff in your model, isn't it? Do you want to give us an idea of the levels in the model and
Sure.
how those relate to what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, the basic assumption behind the model is that as generative AI becomes more understood over time, that it's going to reduce the friction, all the friction points that learners have, interacting with learning today. So if you think about kind of how a typical learning experience is now, there's just tons of friction. I have to know that I need something. I have to know where it lives. I have to know how to dial it up. Once I get to it, it maybe isn't exactly relevant to what I need to be doing on the job. So there's a lot of friction in me even understanding how to apply what I'm doing, what I'm learning to anything that I need to do. Large language models are slowly going to remove all that friction. So kind of our model is based on that. At the very bottom, we're going to remove the developer friction. You get, short courses, or simple courses done super fast. From there, it's going to remove some of the cognitive burden, the cognitive friction for learners. Stuff's going to be more application based, more learn by doing, easier to apply to what you're really trying to do in the real world. When you move up the maturity model from there, you're getting more personalized kind of interactions. You still have to go and know that you need to launch them, but what you're getting back is going to be hyper personalized to what you're trying to accomplish. And then at the very top of that model, the discovery friction basically is removed. So now we have personal tutors. Those tutors are going to be able to proactively reach out to you, suggest what you should be doing, spin those activities and those kind of practice sessions up in real time. So that's kind of how we've structured the model, and it looks pretty solid, at least 2 years in.
Yeah, and in those earlier stages, one of the ways it's taking out friction is dealing with experts. Is that right? With SMEs, which has always been a bit of a time suck and a problem.
Yeah, extracting the knowledge from the subject matter expert's head has always been the core challenge, and it gets harder and harder the more you're trying to get application based stuff that is learned by doing, hands-on kind of activities. We have not found an area, domain of knowledge that large language models can't basically give you your scenario design with a couple of quick prompts, which is going to take months of discovery, months of kind of analysis work that we have to do now to get a scenario built, and just crunch it down into a day or two.
Does that mean you don't need SMEs anymore, or?
You still need them. I mean, that you're just not relying on them for the absolute basics anymore, which is, I think, the part that made them annoyed in interacting with learning and development. They felt like they were kind of walking somebody through by the hand the very basic stuff that they should just know. All of that is taken care of by the large language models. Nuances of the corporate culture, nuances of the specific training audience, some of those things, you need subject matter experts for, and certainly just a fact check. There is the hallucination issue. You have to be cognizant of it. It's not as big of a deal when you prompt the models appropriately, as you might think, but you still want that human check, human in the loop.
Yeah. So rather than like having 5 meetings with an SME, you might generate the stuff through a large language model and just get the SME to check it. So it's down to 1 meeting.
Yeah, so it's basically, the way that you used to approach a subject matter expert is, you're doing a scenario course on, for loan officers in a bank, and it needs to be in green financing kind of area. You would say, subject matter expert, I need a meeting with you. We're going to do some green financing scenarios. Help me figure out what they are. And that's obviously very open-ended. Now we send 5 or 10 sketches to the subject matter expert and say, hey, this is kind of what we need from you. Some of the details may be off here and there, but let's have a conversation, and this is what we need. Just orienting them to exactly what you're trying to produce is a really, really big deal. And again, I mean, sometimes that first meeting, you're done with your scenario design, which is unheard of.
Yeah, so that's the kind of time-saving productivity increases that people have really been looking for a long while. And as you move up the maturity model, you get to very exciting stuff, like you're talking about more scenario-based stuff, which is you're saying is happening at the moment. Yeah,
a lot of it. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing, for things that used to come in the door as kind of level 1 awareness level courses, where there's effectively no interaction, there's no decision making. We're seeing a lot more of those kind of requests come in with, and please use scenario-based quizzing. Please contextualize with a little bit of practice along the way. Clients are already starting to pick up that you can now get that almost for free. There isn't going to be a lot of extra analysis and design work in it anymore.
So the existence of AI is kind of changing the expectation and changing the way the requirements come in. So.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, people are a lot less afraid, I think, of, at least in some industries, are a lot less afraid of the subject matter expert burden than they used to be. So they're now they're proactively asking for things that I think they would have been hesitant to ask for before.
And is that similar with kind of scenarios and stuff that involves branching, whereas in the past people would have thought, well, we've got a fairly limited budget, we can't expect any branching. Now it's, well, you've got AI, you can do fully branched stuff, some game-based stuff. For the same budget, I was going to have something relatively flat. Is that the mentality you're seeing?
We're starting to see it. I mean, there's a big spread in where our clients are right now. I mean,
Yeah.
I would say, a good minority of them are currently in the spot where they're thinking that way. They're thinking we can get a lot better stuff in the same price points now. I mean, there are always going to be clients whose main focus is we need to pump out 20 more hours of training a month or whatever. But certainly we're seeing it elevate.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's just to be expected, isn't it? That knowledge is kind of patchy, and so the demand is slightly different. Robust maturity models are difficult to construct in an emerging field like generative AI, partly for that reason that the future suddenly arrives, but it's unevenly distributed, to quote William Gibson, whoever. Don Taylor and Egil Vinauskaite have released UK-based, so may not be that familiar for US people, but very familiar over in Europe. They've released what they call an immaturity model, which is to cope with the uncertainty factor here. Do you expect, based on what you've seen over the last few months since you first released this model, do you expect to modify the original lines of it? Or are you basically happy with its broad lines? Do you think you got it right first time?
I feel like it's holding up. Again, the model is mostly around the notion that the friction on every dimension is going to be removed by large language models, which now can understand intent. And what we're seeing is that the Sam Altmans of the world, where they're putting their money right now is definitely in the technologies that are going to enable those real-time tutors that we have at the top of our maturity model. You're seeing a lot of focus on agentic kind of frameworks and agentic technologies. Those are going to allow for the proactivity that's required of that personal tutor. You're also seeing in a lot of the research from Anthropic, who I follow very, very closely, you're seeing their technological advancements moving in a different but also necessary direction, which is around the multiple context protocols, where they're trying to make sure that the large language models are going to have access to all the various data sources that they need to really personalize to you in a deep way. I think those two things kind of joining up right now and being major focus items gives me a lot of hope that we're going to have the technology we need for the top level of the maturity model really soon.
Okay, I hadn't realized that there was that kind of divergence between them. I thought they're all basically racing to do the same sort of thing. Can you talk a little bit more about that difference there and maybe state it in simple terms that I can get my head around a bit easier? What is different about the OpenAI approach and the Anthropic approach?
Well, I mean, I think that OpenAI is overall, they're focused on getting a really good, solid foundation, I think, for kind of commercial, maximizing the commercial side of what they're doing. So they're focusing a lot on getting lots and lots of servers and getting kind of a feature set in place that folks really want. When they released their GPT framework, which was like the custom bots you can make through an interface with OpenAI. That was their push into agentic modes of interaction, and that's kind of been a big focus for them. On the Anthropic side, they've been focused a lot more on kind of creating a set of product features inside the model that are going to make it more useful to people. And the thing that they've been focused on the most is how do we let a large language model know what you're doing at any given time? Like if I want a really great workmate AI on my computer, it needs to know what I'm reading. Maybe it needs to be able to search my emails for me. Maybe it needs to even be able to get back to some database, some Google Drive folder that I have somewhere. They've been really focused on making sure those connections can happen and that their models can control computers, basically, again, so that you're able to ask a large language model to accomplish a task on your computer, send an email for me. It'll be able to find your email program. It'll be able to search the emails. It'll be able to look at your address book, all those kind of things. That's been Anthropic's main focus, I think, for the past year or so anyway.
That's really interesting. And the whole discourse about agentic AI, I think, ramps up the level of expectation as well, I think, because it's just, for instance, I was formatting an invoice today to send off, trying to get the invoicing done before Christmas. And I was thinking, if only an AI could do this for me. It's just such a simple kind of task in a way. It's a Word document, Could I get an AI to do this for me? And the thing it seems is slightly difficult for me is that, there are all these programs I've got on my computer, services I'm signed into, some, cloud-based, some on the desktop, blah, blah, blah. Wrangling those things, getting them together would be easier if it weren't for the fact they all belong to different companies with different strategic objectives and so on as vendors and suppliers. I just wonder if there's going to be kind of hiccups along the way to doing that.
Oh, for sure.
Because what Anthropic seemed to be focusing on there and suggesting, it just seems very exciting. I've read about that.
They're the group I'm the most excited about right now. So we're doing an awful lot of our experimenting inside of Anthropic's models and inside of their feature set. If you're a developer-minded person, you can already get it to make your Word document for you. You can get it to send your emails for you. You can get agents to do all those things for you. It's just there's a little bit of a question mark about when the UX is going to get worked out to the point that just everybody can make those connections and give those kind of features into their desktop environment.
Yeah, I'd like to talk a bit more about UX because that's your particular area of expertise. But just while we're on this point, LLMs have been evolving in the last 5 to 6 months. Is the progress that you've seen just an intensification of the power that was already there, in your view, in this technology? I.e., they're ironing out the bugs, maybe it's getting more accurate, or are you discovering new affordances and use cases that LLMs have revealed that perhaps you hadn't thought of at the beginning of the year when it comes to learning?
Yeah, I would say that this is another area where I think each provider each service provider has a slightly different story to tell. I think that with OpenAI, I've mostly seen model progress. That is, it's been an intensification of what I already saw from them, mostly. On Anthropic's side, I'm seeing a lot more focus on kind of enabling technologies that they're bundling in around the large language model, and that is opening up a lot of things that I would have never thought of before. Exactly how they're going to hit learning, I think, is a big question mark. But just as an example, I do some coding and I code in Visual Studio Code. And right now I have an agent set up that knows my entire code base. And it can actually make the changes for me. And I'm not sifting through 20 code files. It's doing that for me. So that's something that I did not think we were going to have at this point in the game. And the speed with which I'm seeing those kind of wrapper technologies get up to speed and be reliable is really, really shocking.
I get the sense that developers and people who code like yourself are kind of seeing a bit further over the hill than the rest of us who are just stuck with, banging out documents in, Word and using language and spreadsheets and all the rest of it. It's clear from your work that AI not only helps us to do things we were already doing at scale a lot cheaper and faster, but lets us do things at quality we couldn't aspire to before because there were blockers with time and money. So, for instance, like we mentioned with scenarios and branching narratives. Where would you say the market is right now in its expectations around AI? We talked a little bit about expectations, but is it all about cost efficiencies? We can save time doing this stuff. Or is quality improvement figuring in people's aspirations too?
Well, the quality improvement is basically coming along free for the ride. Whether or not the expectations are there yet, they will be very, very soon. We're doing kind of even the basic work we do, and we're using large language models to help power the development, and we're getting over the top feedback. I mean, clients are like, this is amazing. I can't believe this. What happened? Because the writing level is just so high in what you get back from the model now. I'd say overall, like the expectations are kind of baked into the DNA of the learning and development groups we work with. There are folks who have always been very focused on cost efficiency, and they're still mostly focused on cost efficiency. There are other clients who have always been very, very laser focused on effectiveness. They're the ones that we're seeing really lean into that side of the equation where you can, get more, a lot more quality within the same time and budget.
Yeah, so big power that's always been kind of appreciated there in terms of productivity is scale, that, it enables us to do things at scale. Is what you're saying, that the quality comes along for the ride. It's not necessarily a kind of primary focus, but what's starting to become, people will start to become more aware of the fact that you can now do quality at scale, which is always rather difficult. Bespoke's always more expensive than generic. On the other hand, if you've got a tool that can do bespoke things in 30 different job roles, as easily as one, you get that quality along with the scale. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you point to something that we're really, really interested in right now, which is, this idea of a virtual curriculum. I mean, you can imagine a time in which, companies are going to be publishing, lists of kind of courses that they want to offer, letting learners, pick which ones they want and developing them really in the moment. That the demand is shown when someone picks up that says, yes, I want to take this course. You can imagine that being spun up for them really more or less in real time. So I think the line between custom and kind of generic off the shelf is going to blur a lot. There's just not going to be as much reason or business case behind that off the shelf stuff in the very, very near future.
Oh, that's really interesting, because it's, my background in learning tech was always the two very different sectors. You had the generic, you had the skill softs, and then you had the people who kind of custom developed, and never the twain shall meet. And they, very different kind of organization structures and all the rest of it. So that line disappears. Yeah, less so, I should say, in larger companies like NIIT.
Eventually, it'll probably completely collapse. I mean, they'll be very similar businesses in the end.
The big benefit we always hope for with any new technology is productivity improvement. The internet seemed to promise greater productivity, but it hasn't shown up in the numbers recently, which is a kind of something people scratch their heads around, and it's a bit of a problem. This stuff is supposed to give us better productivity. Do you think generative AI stands a better chance of delivering that all-important productivity boost? And if so, what are your grounds for thinking of that?
Well, it's hard for me to imagine that it fails to achieve that goal. And I mean, this is just firsthand, at least in a lot of places. And this is firsthand, right? I mean, I'm a creator, at core. I write proposals and, kind of new product sketches and, lots and lots and lots of creative product. And, I am able to get a lot deeper, a lot faster now than I've ever been able to get. I would say I am probably delivering about 10x what I was able to deliver before. And I've really embraced it. I've looked for every nook and cranny that I can use large language models to speed up my workflows, to get me drafts, to get me kind of elaborated depth in proposals that I wouldn't be able to get to otherwise. So I'm noticing, and across my teams, I'm noticing, we're getting to a much greater level of depth. We're producing a lot more product along the way. And I don't see how you can avoid that with large language models, at least in the creative space or in the sort of content creation space.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask if you get paid 10x more. There you
go. Funny you should mention that.
Yeah, no, but that is really interesting. I mean, a 10x improvement in productivity for any one employee is enormous. And, what we're hearing is that technology is not giving you that kind of improvement because because why? I don't know, GDPR, because of the way that it's developed in the kind of organizational background. AI really gives us a chance of getting past those bugbears. Yeah.
It really does. I mean, I do think policy is really the thing that's in the way of huge productivity right now, and I'm hoping that folks are going to figure that out and take care of it. I mean, what we're seeing in a lot of big client organizations now is they've kind of guardrailed some hobbled version of one of the large language models, and that's what people are using, and they're kind of using it like glorified Google. It's just finding documents and summarizing documents and so forth for them. It can just do so much more than that, and I think when there's greater understanding of the relative security and safety of the top models, I think a lot of it's going to a lot of the productivity is going to show up really, really quickly. It's just folks are struggling to understand that really, really basic things like, when you're using an API connection, you're not exposing anything in any kind of way that you're not over a Teams call, right? There's no additional real risk in there. And as long as there are nice safeguards in your system around human review and human audit, there's effectively no more risk in using a model than not using a model. And folks just have to still be convinced of that, I think.
Yeah. I have a question for you about safety, but I want to get to the other question I've been stacking up here, which is about the UX. So, Brandon, you're a VP of user experience and UX is your wheelhouse. What do you expect will be the effects on user experience of using this type of AI? Potentially, I suppose. Will we have to accept compromises on UX to get the sort of scale efficiencies promised by the technology?
Well, it's really interesting. The ultimate effect of large language models on what we think of as a typical user experience, they're really hard. They're really hard right now to imagine. And they're going to require completely new paradigms of interaction that we've just never had before. If you think about your typical interface now, a lot of what it's doing is it's giving you the ability to sort of point to an action you want the system to take, right? Because it can't understand your intention. So it's all about putting buttons on the screen in places that are logical so you can find them and push them. Large language models can understand your intention and they can take action in the real world. So the need for these buttony interfaces is going to go away. What's probably going to be needed is a lot more display technology where you're interacting through voice or through other signs of intention that you might be giving the system. And exactly what that's going to look like is really really hard to sort out. I mean, you can kind of imagine a world in which your devices don't really matter as much, that, you're going to be interacting with an entity, through your voice. You're going to be seeing what you need to see to understand whatever it is that the model's bringing back to you, because it understands the intention of the interaction. I think in learning, voice interfaces are going to become a lot more of a thing. In the very, very near future, we're already seeing people come in, asking for that. So I think that's one area we're going to see immediate impact. I think more than anything, you're going to see an increase in the level of fidelity that we're going to have with these large language models launching. Again, just because you're able to get through the basic design work and the basic sort of content development work so quickly, you have a lot more time and a lot more resources free to really refine the media, the exact kind of feel and function of what you're creating.
Yeah, that's interesting, because the sense I get is that we're getting, people at last are beginning to shut up about Mr. Clippy, I think, because that was always the thing that came up, with kind of chatbots and this type of interactive rather than, point and click stuff is, this machine is trying to guess what I want to do next, and it's really irritating. But I think we're all getting to grips with various types of that type of UX where we interact with something which is trying to guess what we want to do, whether it's Spotify or TikTok or whatever. And I think there's, you become conscious that actually machines are getting better at this, that sometimes the effect of that interaction is very pleasing and very good. And you've just saved yourself a load of time and effort and things happen very seamlessly. Other times there's still that slight kind of Mr. Clippy, will you just get out of my face type of feel about it. Don't try and guess, that's not what I want to say in this sentence. That wasn't the word that, the autocomplete tries to give you a word which is completely different, whatever. So it seems to me there's kind of, a big plus and minus thing going on there. Are the machines training us?
The machines have always been training us. The reason that the modern web is intuitive is because we've all learned to use it, right? So in a way, our behavior has changed. When I see people trying to interact with large language models, the biggest challenge in getting them to really get the most out of the model is to get them to stop applying what they've learned from Google. Right? Google has trained you about the word order that you should use when you're asking for something, about the brevity that should be in your request. All these things have been trained into the entire population by Google. And in large language models, the approach is almost exactly the opposite. You want to tell it more. You want to give it more of your intention. You want it to understand the goals really clearly. I think the machines are training us. I think we'll have a similar phenomena with large language models. We'll all learn to be creative directors, basically, instead of Google searchers, and we'll really start seeing the power of the model at that point.
Yeah. That is interesting, about the way that you interact with this technology. Is you have to give it context, you have to give it background. You have to say, act as a script writer, act as a literary critic, act as this, act as that. And that's a very different type of conversation, as you say, to what we've ever had with Google.
Yeah, and you're also trying to get the models to understand the stakes, which is just really, really strange. So like when we're trying to get feedback tuned in, so it's really, really helpful feedback. We spend a lot of time instructing the model around the stakes. This is a job role that's highly critical. If we let people out into the world and they don't know the skill, it's going to harm people. It's really critical that you don't let any errors slip here. When you back up and you give it that kind of information, the same kind of information you'd give a really great creative team, right? If you had a great creative team that you could work with, that's what it needs too, which is just a really strange way of thinking of machines.
Yeah, that makes me think that the people who are going to be best at prompting are like primary school teachers, or people who trainers, for that matter.
Yeah, we're seeing that.
Because there is this sense of, what do I have to tell this person? What background do I have to give? I slipped into calling it a person. I know that's anthropomorphic. In order for them to be able to do the task, to understand what they want, what I want, and so on. Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah, we're seeing kind of creative director profiles and folks who have run writing teams, and the folks who are really, really good at writing a creative brief, people who are really good at understanding whether or not what they've received is what they asked for, being able to articulate the delta between what they asked and what they received for. Those kind of direction skills are the real skills. And that's who we're seeing excel as prompt writers and AI app builders right now.
Very interesting. So to dig deeper into your wheelhouse, your background, you're a writer by training, and we kind of touched on that. I'm a writer. Listening to how you describe your experiments with LLMs, it seems to me that it must have been a pretty humbling experience for a writer, what you went through there. And you kind of hint at that in the webinar that you get. Stepping back slightly from your professional excitement at the power of this technology, how did it feel to see your particular creative skill area encroached on in this way? And are you, two questions for the price of one here, are you an all-in techno-optimist, or are you somewhere on the P-doom scale with this stuff?
Well, I mean, in the initial set of experiments we ran, there was a lot of denial from me. I almost didn't want to see it. I didn't want it to succeed. And when I started becoming very convinced that the best large language models could beat me on almost any writing task, on almost any dimension you wanted to measure them on. Yeah, there was definitely some despair that sunk in there. I mean, I think fortunately, I'm the kind of writer who isn't totally in love with the fiddly work of making the perfect sentence. I mostly want the impact of the final kind of product. I want to see somebody using and enjoying a thing and getting benefit from it. So for me, it was kind of an easy step to realize, okay, I can get a lot more of that than I ever could before now. So there was something to be excited about in there. Just it's removing some of the fiddly work that I didn't really want to be doing in the first place. I would say I'm a techno fatalist, maybe more than a techno optimist. I believe that the technology is so powerful that it's not going to be contained. I've seen it. It's going to be here. It's going to be part of our lives. And so I've kind of narrowed my focus on all things AI to really just how can we use it? How can we partner with it? How can we make it be something that's good for us instead of bad for us? And so that's kind of that's the way I see it. I think in the end, our lives are going to be a lot better for having it. And so I'm an optimist in that sense. There's going to be a lot of pain getting there. Jobs are going to be redefined. Folks are going to have to find new things to do with themselves. And there's going to be turmoil like there is around any huge technological revolution. But I think like all the ones that came before this, in the end, there's going to be more opportunity created and more benefit created than pain we have to endure in the short term.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very pragmatic approach, I think. But how about the kind of wider shores of worry? I'm pushing you to give us your PDOOM number. I mean, there's an interesting page on Wikipedia where they give the PDOOM numbers of a number of people, like from Elon Musk to, the CEO of Anthropic. And there's such a wide variety from kind of 0% to rather wide ranges, 0 to 20%, 0 to 50%. Have you quantified your PDOOM number?
I've not. I mean, I would say I think it's very difficult for me to imagine the worst case scenarios. I mean, I've used the models enough that I'm not terribly worried about sentience, right? I'm not terribly worried about the models, breaking out of their containers and doing silly things that people are super worried about right now. I'm more worried about, what commercial models ultimately are going to prevail here. And I think that depending on how these large language model companies end up succeeding in commercializing their businesses, that's going to determine whether we have kind of a dystopian future or a pleasant one. If they find ways to fund this where, we're not really, being monetized as rich user profiles for sales, but rather, some other pay model, I think we'll be in a lot better place.
Essentially, I read that superintelligence book, a number of years back, and it didn't worry me too much. I just thought it seemed incredibly theoretical and in a way unlikely. And I'd worked with clunky technology all my life, that very slowly got better, and realised that there's a lot of things that can stop it getting there. Another thing that occurs to me is that if you look at the human intelligence as compared with machine intelligence, they're such different things. There's this huge difference of type. And a lot of those doom scenarios seem to be based on the idea that if we increase if we kind of 10x production every year, or whatever, we 10x the amount of compute we can put to this every year, eventually you will get to, general intelligence and lead to a takeover. I'm not sure that's really true, because it's a difference of type as well. And people have said that it's not just an arms race, that implicit in the development expectations are the idea that we will invent new clever stuff that we haven't quite got yet, able to make machine intelligence slightly more like human intelligence? Because at the moment they are very dissimilar.
They're very dissimilar. I mean, the models right now, they don't have any kind of proactivity. And they don't really have an always-on kind of learning mechanism, which I don't think people are aware of, right? Models go through this intense training period, requires thousands of engineers and tremendous volumes of compute, and you have the model that you have at the end of that training. It's not like it's learning from you in real time and adjusting its own weights and whatnot. So that's what a human's doing, right? I mean, even as we're talking right now, both of our brains are readjusting. We're learning things about how the world works and so forth, and we'll put those into action. Models can't do that. And, there's nothing that I see inherent in the technology that's going to allow for that. So the current generation of generative AI doesn't scare me anyway.
Yeah, and they do need a huge amount of data to be trained.
Enormous.
Whereas humans can make sort of big judgments based on really quite scant pieces of data. Anyway, it all gets a bit academic. I'm sorry about this, Brandon. Lastly, what should people expect to see in the field of AI and learning in the coming 12 months or so? I mean, people don't like to do this to predict because it's such an uncertain field, but you can see a bit further over the hill than most of us, I think, both from NIIT and more generally, what's coming up.
Well, I think there's going to be two main branches of push in learning and development. I think one is going to be all of the, kind of bots that are going to hit the market that are really focused on how do I take all the organizational knowledge and make it effectively Googleable and summarizable, right? So that's going to be a whole focus for a lot of people is definitely going to be on that end. On the other end, I do think we're going to start seeing over the next several months big deployments of real-time artificial intelligence running role plays and simulations. We're already seeing that bubble up. I think that, if we were to meet again this time next year, that, it will not be an uncommon thing for people to be talking about. And I think that's going to be an enormous shift. Right now, most people don't realize that's even an option. They don't really know that large language models can power those kinds of organic real-time experiences that are, super game-like and personal. That's going to change. We're already seeing it change. I would say probably about half the people I talk to right now are at least aware of that capability and are interested in hearing about it. I think the rest of the other half will be covered off in the next 12 months. And I think just with everybody aware of it and talking about it, we're going to see it take really, really strong hold. That's my prediction.
That's really interesting. And I would think it'd be really great if we could have this conversation in a year's time or again. It's been great to talk to you. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for the time today, Brandon.
Thank you, John.
That's all on the Learning Leaders podcast for this time. Many thanks to our guest. Learning Leaders comes from NIIT in association with the Learning Hack. To make sure you don't miss an episode, please subscribe to the show on your platform of choice or on YouTube. And if you want to help others find us, please make sure you like, rate and give a glowing review. We'll be back in your feed very soon. So until next time, keep the faith, keep leading, and above all, keep learning.